So the principle of all of these things is basically the same. The principle is get that electric field implosive, magnetically, optically, dielectrically, and you will treat the matter, the atoms, the molecules, to the privilege of becoming implosive. And that will make them stable as a monoatom or microcluster. And when you do that to hydrogen, you get all these very interesting properties of hydrogen. How many are familiar with Professor Santilli's Magna Gas project? Anybody know about that? Yes. So a bunch of people have invented a different name for what happens to the plasma of hydrogen when you implode it, but it's magic. It is just absolutely magic. You got this plasma of hydrogen, which can pass through certain substances, like going through a mirror. It reminds me of the Brown's gas material. Let's talk about Brown's gas for just a moment. The Brown's gas is behind the presentation of Spiros. Thank you. So Spiros is going to be talking to you very shortly about his work and studied personally with Mr. Brown. Wasn't that correct? Yes. And in the Brown's gas device, among other things, you took the hydrogen plasma that came out, and you could take that hydrogen flame, a blue fire that does not consume, and there's all kinds of films of this, and I'm sure you'll be talking more about this, but you can take that blue flame and you can cut through a brick. You can cut through steel. But when you take that same blue flame, it won't cut your hand. I want you to know why. Do you know why? Yes, go ahead.
It's thought that it imparts electrons into the material, and if the material is really conductive, it will conduct them away, and if it's not very conductive, then it will melt and
I like that. That's a helpful language. And the way, is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you see.
But I want to know if you're being facetious.
No. You see, now a conventional electrical engineer, I'm an electrical engineer, would say, wait, steel is more conductive than human tissue.
No, but water won't even boil if you put Brown's gas flame on it.
That's right.
Because it will absorb
Right.
those electrons.
Yeah, wonderful. So what you're saying is it did not create heat. And I think we can get that language to be a little bit more precise when we...
I hope so.
Yes. When we understand that living human tissue has an electrical quality called phase conjugate, which means that the charge propagation through there, when you introduce the implosive compression of hydrogen in anything that's not phase conjugate, you'll make lots of heat in the steel. When you put it through your hand, if your hand is healthy, if the tissue is healthy, it won't make heat because the compression in a fractal makes no heat. This is how you survive the solar wind, the rapture. You don't want to be the left behind, do you? Right. No. So get fractal or get dead. So the idea here is that if you understand the actual physics of what's making that vril, blue flame, the fire that does not consume, implosive, a cold fire, the physics of fusion, what is the deep symmetry of that flame? My teacher at the Gurdjieff School got his PhD in physics on the physics of flame at the Sorbonne. Studying flame is a wonderful spiritual meditation. And we are now, at this moment, studying the flame of the Brown's gas. The other thing that all these people have noticed is that implosive plasma of hydrogen will travel through tubes as a waveguide in ways that you would not normally consider a gas would propagate. So we're getting a powerful clue to the nature of implosion by studying the flame that is hydrogen. Now the Joe cell, as we were discussing, we now think we know how to take those concentric rings and optimize that. Let's try to take a specific example. Specifically, how would we actually optimize the Joe cell if we understood the physics? Let me give you a little background here. Our friends in Australia, friends of Joe, they were famous. They could take about any car and they could go to a hardware store and buy about $200 worth of stuff, and they could modify any car, and you could drive it across Australia in a cup full of water. ran into trouble with the government. You could make a good movie of the story. But the point is, there's some lessons to be learned here. You're driving along in your car on imploding hydrogen, and what you notice is when you're somewhere where the charge is organized, you get lots of power. But if you happen to drive over a railroad track where there's lots of metal railroad right by your car, you know what happens? It stops. I'd like you to explain to me why. This is our lesson for the day. Also, incidentally, as Paul was mentioning, if the sun happens to be obscured, you lose power. The nature of implosion is that the electrical inertia is being sucked in from the environment. If the environment is fractal, you gather a lot of inertia in the centripetal process. For the same reason that rainbows only occur when the air is fractal. We don't have time for that discussion right now, but it's a beautiful metaphor to learn from. So the reason your car stops when you drove over the railroad tracks, if you're using imploding hydrogen, is because the railroad tracks are made of steel, opposite to phase conjugate. For the same reason that steel and aluminum in your house take the souls from your children, because it prevents their aura from having a place to grow. Your house and your car and your city need to look like a rose, that is, be fractal, if your aura wants the ability to grow. And that is the purpose of life, is to grow your aura, your ka. In Sumerian, that would be called fa-atun, to fatten, to feed your aura. So the aura of your car could no longer get fed. Let me give you another way to think about that. Later, if we have time, we're going to discuss the physics of human bliss. Now, human bliss is actually powered by the same electricity as that car. When that car is driving along on imploding hydrogen, it's depending on the implosion of the electric field of its environment. So, when a human being has bliss, this is a human being having an intense bliss experience. Thank you, Roger. That if you measure the power spectra of their brain waves with my invention, the Bliss Tuner, and the new version is coming out this week, thelovetuner.com, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 5 harmonics in the EEG cross hemisphere precisely in golden mean ratio, which means that your brain is making phase conjugation to cause your plasma to implode, and you call that enlightenment. But what we notice with people like myself who have 30 years of intense Kundalini experience is that if you try sustaining bliss experience in a building made of steel and aluminum, eventually you're going to feel poisoned for the same reason that car stopped. Because if your environment is not fractal, there is no centripetal inertia available to absorb. I'd like to give you one final example in terms of biologic plasma. You remember we were talking about, we had Pat Flanagan describing negative ion and negative hydrogen ion therapy. And he was talking about biologic terrain analysis, that you could predict whether you had cancer or healthy cells by simply measuring the water for redox, which is fractality, pH, and resistance. That's the biologic terrain. Now, this is the device we were using to measure phase conjugate dielectrics. It's called IGA from Russia. This is the device I wish to discuss here at this moment. This we learned about from Joyce at the New Hope Center in UK. This website is still active, NEMNDT. This is a strong negative ion wind generator. So I'm shooting a wind of negative ions very powerfully at the body, and the body is here electrically grounded. Now, by shooting imploded negative ion winds, the same way you would treat a seed to cause it to germinate. Remember, a negative ion is an electric fractal. By shooting a powerful wind of those negative ions at the body, with proper grounding, sessions 10 to 20 minutes a day, a couple times a week, you can drive very difficult infection out of the body. This is called cell care therapy. There are new versions of this coming out. For example, spinal meningitis. How do you get that kind of infection out? This is effective. You have to be careful because you can overload the liver. But it's a powerful way to to kill bacteria and viruses in the body. Now, the reason I bring this up at this moment is Joyce, who used this at her healing center in Edinburgh, where we did this presentation with her, said that she figured out that she had to have everything in this room be made of natural material. All natural fabrics, all wood, fine. But if she had a room that was full of steel and aluminum and plastic, this would not work. In the same way, the Joe cell would stop. I want you to think to yourself, please think to yourself at this moment, what is the reason why that this negative ion wind will not work unless the room itself is made of phase conjugate or living organic materials? The reason, yes?
Well, I just would guess that it's because that's where the energy's coming from.
Good. See, we have a good original thinker here, dear. You should go to the head of the class. I like it. So what she said is, that's because that's where the energy's coming from, and that's precisely correct. That if the room itself is phase conjugate or fractal, there is inertia electrically there available to implode. Whereas, for the same reason you can't measure fractality in air in a steel box. And for the same reason, a seed will die if you plant it in a steel or aluminum cup, because the capacitance is not fractal or phase conjugate. So you need an environment where charge can implode or breathe if you want life and healing, and if you want hydrogen energy to work. So one of the criticisms of some of the Joe cell devices and technology was because it was undependable. But once you understand the physics, it's no longer a mystery, it's not a miracle, it's a pure principle. You begin to understand how you design systems that could take the available implosive nature of atmosphere and use that energy. Now, it's true, implosion devices are not free energy. I'm going to end with this thought. I have been saying for 20 years now that anybody who says they want free energy indicates, by using the word free, that they don't deserve to have it. It's not free. No, sorry. No free lunch. Not available. No. The electrical inertia that comes from implosion devices comes directly from gravity. In the same way that a pine cone, by opening and closing slowly, modulates the amount of voltage it gets from gravity. So that this is in Vortex of Life, Fields of Form, the Lawrence Edwards work, the anthroposophic biodynamic work, that the seeds and the surface of a pine cone open and close slightly to modulate the amount of voltage they're getting from gravity in just the same way that you can measure 4 to 14 millivolts from the top and bottom of a fresh chicken egg. The source of that voltage is the fractality of electrical implosion. A chicken egg and a pine cone are a fractal capacitor, and the voltage you call life comes from gravity. It's sucked out of gravity. And Mother Earth is happy to give that if there's some kind of reciprocal relationship. But it's not free. In fact, the people that destroyed Atlantis may have thought they had free energy also. But in fact, their tectonics sort of became destabilized, and that's another story. The point I'm making here is the very schizophrenia of physics that thinks that electromagnetic fields are disconnected from gravitational field. That's a sad schizophrenia. And that kind of schizophrenia is the type that thinks, oh, we can get some free energy. Once you understand the electrical relationship of charge to gravity, which is precisely fractal, and begin to understand how that living, circulating bloodstream of charge, called life, actually works, then you can participate in what was called the divine, and you have more ability to take responsibility for these kinds of energy sources. Now, admittedly, we've only touched on the surface of the physics and the technology implications of using these energies, and I'd be pleased to go into this further. For example, how we would take the same spectrum analyzer that I used to measure the freshness of a chicken egg. Let me just show you real briefly here, just to try to make the point. Here is how I would check a Joe cell and Brown's gas capacitor. Here's how I would test it. I would put my little capacitor in the center in the same way I measure a fresh chicken egg for life. By measuring harmonic inclusiveness, I check to see if this cascade of contained harmonics is fractal and phase conjugate. And using that spectrum analyzer, we can perfect the electric field, the dielectrics, which are behind the magna gas Brown's gas. The same way you measure a heart for fractality, you can measure the heart of this device for fractality and optimize it. You can actually create the correct frequency signatures to create life. Here I'm using spectrum analysis of the weak capacitance to measure life force in water. And we take the output of a capacitor on the order of 1/1,000,000th of a volt, spectrum analyzed, and we can tune your heart. We can tune every living thing by one simple principle to make life. And the same principle applies to hydrogen. And that principle is that harmonic inclusiveness, hint, fractal, defines viability. If you take the spectrum analysis of your heart, if it's harmonically inclusive, you have an immune system. If there's only 1 or 2 harmonics, it means you're dead. Okay? Called the healthy heart is a fractal heart. But it turns out you can do that for every living thing. You can use your voice. You can go to a forest, spectrum analyze the sound of a forest. And the forest is sick when there's missing harmonics. And you can heal the forest the same way you heal a voice. And you can do that for atoms, babies, galaxies, and hydrogen atoms to create sustainability by replacing the missing harmonic to fit phase conjugation and fractality. So it's a complete harmonic recipe of implosion, fractality, that allows us to tune these systems. And the key is frequency signature spectrum analysis. Okay, so that was a little shtick, a little song and dance, introduction to some new insights into how we can apply these things to hydrogen technologies. Tomorrow, I'm going to share with you a little bit more about how we create bioactive electric fields. I note that it's 3:05, Roger. Should we try a few questions? We should just move on right now, you think? We'll do questions later?
Well, I think we could move on because Dan's going to be doing some more presentations, if you're okay with that, or
Yes.
Are you desperate for questions?
Anybody have an imminent, urgent need to ask a question?
Can you repeat one of those last sentences? Harmonic inclusiveness defines what?
Repeat.
Harmonic inclusiveness defines...
Yeah, harmonic inclusiveness, which is equivalent to fractality, defines viability in every living thing, starting with HRV and extending to every living thing, baby stars, galaxies, atoms, forests, and hydrogen atoms. Spectrum analyze, optimize harmonic inclusiveness by golden ratio and fractality, obviously, and you stabilize that wave. It emerges from chaos. So you can replace a missing harmonic in a voice or in a hydrogen atom, and you can heal it. Yeah? We'll talk more about that tomorrow.
Just one more.
Yes, go ahead.
You mentioned HRV. What's HRV?
Heart rate variability. The low frequencies of your heart. It's well proven that fractality and heart rate variability predicts your immune system, dead or alive. Yes?
Just want to mention something, Dan, real quick. Practical application of the 7.5.
Yes.
And this is something that many people have done through time. Magic ritual.
Yes.
Above, below, right, left, back, forth, north, south, east, west. The elementals plus the 4 pentagrams. We have been using that for a while. Creates life.
That's good. That's good. We'll have more fun there.
Yeah.
The 7.5 sigil was the Ophanian and the Cherokee. So more to come on that. Yes.
And of course, we've got a panel discussion.
Yes.
So people can maybe, you can tell the global audience there that they'll have a chance to answer some questions.
Panel discussion.
Yeah.
Yes, later in the day.
Because we want to move on to Ross Spiros from
So we're
Australia.
preparing now to put Spiros on the stage. Catherine, so we've elected to delay questions till later. I hope that's okay.